With that in mind, let's jump into our next section of our Counterculture Show with worship with Pastor Ricky Trinidad. Baby.
Yellow.
Red. Blue. Rhythm. Balance.
Well, for this podcast and the next, I want to talk about the difference between practicing and rehearsing.
It's not the same thing?
Not the same thing.
Wait, practice and rehearsal.
This entire time
and rehearsing.
I've been doing it wrong.
And it's important to understand the difference, and especially if you're a leader, you're a worship leader, worship pastor, you need to understand
So if you're a follower, you don't have to understand it.
I said especially if you're a worship leader.
So I do need to understand it a little bit.
Yes, well, it's important to understand the difference. And we'll find out as we go through why. First of all, practice. In this podcast, we'll talk about practicing.
First of all,
what is
practice?
Practice.
Are we
Practice.
talking about practice?
Practice?
Let's talk about practice?
Practice?
Practice.
That sounds like Alvin Iverson.
Chipmunks.
Is
Iverson.
it Alvin? Alvin Iverson?
Allen.
Oh, Allen. Well, he did start with the letter A.
Yes,
Yes.
you're right. Yes.
A lot of names that start with the letter
Yes.
A.
Adam.
Alvin and the Chickmunks, you think you wanted to say.
It's the it's the kid in me. I'm sorry.
I'm still surprised that you memorized the names of like every single cartoon and like the caves that they go into.
The Cave of Wonders?
Yes. Like that. Anyways, I digress.
So we're talking about
Practice. And I think it's a lot of people say, well, practice makes perfect. There's a falsity to that.
Oh, so it's
There's
not in
an
the Bible.
error in that. No.
The Bible doesn't say practice makes perfect?
Perfect practice makes perfect.
It doesn't say that either.
Yeah, it doesn't say that either.
That sounded good.
Yeah, perfect practice makes perfect. And what I mean is that you got to practice the right way. What is practice? Practicing is what you do on your instrument or whatever your talent is.
What you do?
If I sing out of tune. Whatever it is you're good at, okay? Whatever it is that you're talented at, and that's what you do on your own to be better at it. It's practicing.
I'm good at playing the guitar.
Then practicing would be what you do on your own to be better at playing the guitar.
So fixing my scales
well, that's what we're going to go into, yeah.
Okay.
A golfer would practice golfing by himself. Well, he wouldn't really rehearse anything, but he would practice. A vocalist would practice singing by themselves. They wouldn't practice it when they're with everybody else.
Are we talking about practice?
Practice.
So
there's a difference. Practice is what you do on your own with the gift that God has given you. And it's important to practice. Why? Because the Bible does say that God... What are you singing? Are you singing?
No, I'm not singing. I'm just practicing.
Oh. Your host with the most. Your host with the most. Your host with the most. Your host with the most.
Oh.
Yeah. So practicing is what you do on your own.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah, not with us. So, and it's important. Why? Because if you start practicing when you're with everybody, you're going to start wasting people's time in rehearsal. And we'll talk about rehearsal in the next podcast. So practicing, what does practice look like? Well, if you're a musician, you need to know all your major scales. And that's the first thing I tell any musician. I said, do you know your 12 major scales?
That I miss practice. If a coach say I miss practice, and y'all hear it, then that's that. I might have missed one practice this year. But if somebody say he doesn't come to practice, it can be one practice. Out of all the practices this year, that's enough. If I can't practice, I can't practice, man. I'm hurt. I mean, simple as that. It ain't about that. It's not about that at all. You know what I'm saying? I mean, but it's easy to talk about. It's easy to sum it up when you just talk about practice. We sitting here, I'm supposed to be the franchise player, and we're in here talking about practice. I mean, listen, we talking about practice. Not a game. We talking about practice. Not a game. Not the game that I go out there and die for and play every game like it's my last. Not the game. We're talking about practice, man. I mean, how silly is that, man? We're talking about practice. I know I'm supposed to be there. I know I'm supposed to lead by example. I know that. And I'm not shoving it aside, like it don't mean anything. I know it's important. I do. I honestly do. But we talking about practice, man. What are we talking about?
Practice.
Are we talking
Thank
about
you, Pastor Steve, for
practice?
for the commentary on.
So we're talking about practice.
But practice is important.
All right. Well, thank you very much with this Oh, sorry. I thought we were over with the practice.
With special guest.
Practice.
Allen Iverson.
Came on this segment.
All right.
It's important. We got to understand why the Bible does say to play skillfully to the Lord. Play and sing skillfully to the Lord. So how are we going to play skillfully if we're not practicing? There's one of my biggest pet peeves is when I run into young musicians and they're super talented on their instruments, and I say, "Well, how long do you practice? I want to know their practice regimen, to see how much they've dedicated into the gift that God has given them." And they turn back and they look at me like trying to show off. Well, I don't practice. That's okay. If that's a good thing. And I turn around and I don't think they ever expect this from me. And I turn around and I said, "You don't practice? How dare you?
We'll talk about practice.
How dare you don't practice?"
And
Just
you
like
step on
just like
stage?
Allen Iverson. I know it's important, but we'll talk about practice.
I tell them, I say, so you give God your leftovers. So that's tight.
Ooh.
That's cool. I'm glad you give God something that doesn't really cost you anything. I don't understand how we can, if we're saying we're giving God our best on Sundays and we're closing, I give you everything that I am, and yet the gift that He gave us, we choose not to do anything with until Sunday comes.
What did David say?
What did David say?
David said, "I don't ever want to give to the Lord something that doesn't cost me."
Yeah. And that's what it should. It should cost us. I can't tell you how many times my fingers have bled practicing.
Wow.
Yeah, they bleed. They get calluses.
Really?
Oh yeah, dude. They gotta bleed.
But you talk about
practice.
Wait, hold on. I got a question. My index finger never has ever bled.
you don't practice.
From typing.
Whoa, well, I mean, using a mouse.
That's because you use an Apple, so the keyboard is nice and soft.
As opposed to a PC.
Yes, a PC
It's rough around the edges.
really rough,
Rigid.
like blue collar.
Ooh, and mine's a white collar.
Apple's like white color.
Oh, that's why. But I do practice. But if I don't find a callus on my index finger, is that okay?
Yes, for you.
For me,
Because we're talking about
musicians.
It's just
vocals.
vocals obviously shouldn't be bleeding, because if you're singing and you're bleeding, we got issues. We got issues.
911.
Blood spewing out of your mouth.
911, please.
But it has to cost. There has to be some kind of work ethic behind it.
That's right.
Because if not, then you're never gonna be as good as you're intended to be. You'll never reach that full potential. You'll always just be good, but never good. You never give good enough. You'll never give enough of who you are.
Wow.
And that's what God requires from us. I think God requires our
I'm
best.
supposed to be a franchise player, and we in here talking about practice. We sitting here. I'm supposed to be a franchise player, and we in here talking about
I'm about to mute Pastor
we
Steve.
sitting here. I'm supposed to be a franchise player, and we in here talking about practice. We sitting here. I'm supposed to be a franchise player, and we in here talking about practice.
Talking about practice. Talking about practice.
Not a game. We talk about practice.
So practice. What should it look like? Well, again,
Yeah,
if you're
Thanks for answering that question. How does practice look like? Like if I'm new to this.
If there's a new musician coming into any of our worship teams, whether it be youth, adults, whether it be anybody, I hand them a practice sheet. And I was trying to look on that online, and I guess that's down right now, or that worksheet. But it's a worksheet that I created along with Larry Brand, helped design it. And it breaks down a 30-minute practice, which is the bare minimum anyone should be doing is 30 minutes a day. If you can't do 30 minutes a day, then truly you're never going to get to where
You dream
to be. Yeah, where you dream to be or where you need to be. I mean, because if you want to be playing with everyone else and you want to give your best, you're not going to give your best if you're not practicing at least 30 minutes a day. So what does that look like? Well, on the sheet, you'll see that it says first 5 minutes, I always have them dedicated to prayer. It never replaces their prayer life. It shouldn't replace their devotional time or their quiet time with the Lord. But it's definitely something to understand and really digest the fact that this gift is not our own, but it's something on loan from God. It's something that God has given us. And I think it's important to maintain that humility and understanding that by coming first to the Lord with thanksgiving in your heart and praying and asking the Lord to really guide you through this practice that you're about to give, because it's a gift. Again,
and God spoke much about stewardship.
That's right.
What I give you, if you take care of it, if you do it the right way, if you practice right, in this case, even Jesus promised to, if you take care of one thing, you're a good steward, I'll give you another talent, another gift.
That's right.
And it's awesome.
That's right.
because you have given time and prayer. Not only are you gifted drum player, but a bass player, a piano player, and a violinist.
No.
No? Okay.
Guitar.
A guitar.
I play guitar, and it takes practice. So prayer, the first 5 minutes, I give 5 minutes just to practice and make sure that it's
Cinco
again,
minutos.
humility. It's the idea of humility. It's the idea of it's a gift that God has given me. It's not mine. It's the Lord's, and I want to do the best that I can with it. It's not about me. It's about the Lord in me. Like we're talking about being the light. So we start with 5 minutes. I start with 5 minutes of prayer. Next, it would be 10 minutes of warm-ups. Now, there's different warm-ups. If you're a vocalist, your warm-up. There are different warm-ups out there. My wife Saida is a vocalist, and she even has CDs. She's done CDs even for our worship team. They're 30-minute CDs about. That's right, about just warming up. And why? Because the problem is that if you don't warm up your voice, what happens is that you could build what's called nodules. Nodules.
Stop sinning.
Nodules are bumps that could be created in your throat or on top of your vocal cords.
I have one big bump on my throat.
On your vocal cords?
Well, what is this then?
That's your Adam's apple.
Oh.
Yeah. And so it creates that, and you'll need surgery to remove it, and you won't be able to sing. Yes.
How come you don't have an Adam's apple?
I do. It's just that you can't see it through the layers. I'm like an ogre. I have layers.
Oh, you're an ogre.
You're like an onion.
You're like an onion.
You gotta peel it back a little bit at the time.
Peel.
So
banana.
Yeah.
Peel.
So 10 minutes of warming up vocally. You go, "Mame mi momu, mame mi momu, mame mi momu, mame," or bumblebee, 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 bumblebee. And before you even start warming up or singing, it should be something like pharyngeals, relaxing all the muscles, because everything in your face helps create your, this word, timbre. Your timbre is the resonant spaces.
So you're supposed to sound like a horse.
No, not just, but you need some kind of hum behind it. There you go. So if you're interested in those CDs about vocal warm-up, let me know. I can hand you some. If you're a musician, your warm-up should be through the 12 major scales. Again, if you don't know your 12 major scales, if you don't know your 12 major scales, then frankly, you're not going to know anything, because everything revolves around the 12 major scales. After that, because from the 12 major scales, you can play your minor scales, your ionic scales, your Lydian scales, your Dorian scales. There's all kinds of scales out there that you can learn, but you got to learn your major scales first. And you should be able to do them. On a piano, it's easier to play 2 different octaves, but if you're on a guitar, on a bass, trying to play 2 different octave scales.
What if you're in the drums?
If you're in the drums, then you got to learn rudiments. Rudiments are the base. There's 40 basic rudiments.
40?
40 basic rudiments that you need to learn to do correctly. Because from those rudiments, then you can start moving around the drums, and it's a breakdown of all what you can do on the drums.
And then you can do El Tabaroso es el Señor.
Ba ba da ba.
El Tabaroso
es el Señor.
Ba ba da ba.
And then
Actually, they don't even use drums for that.
The percussion.
They use percussion.
Tambourine.
So you should be so you're warming up, doing scales and everything for the 10 minutes. That's 15 minutes. The next 15 minutes you should be practicing the songs that have been given to you by your worship leader, your worship pastor, so that you start memorizing everything and you start being able to make sure that you can play every song before you even come to rehearsal. Before you even play with the group, you got to know it on your own. You got to be able to play it. Pastor Steve's a witness of this. Anytime there's a new song that we're singing and it's difficult, I practice it because I know I got to teach it to everybody else. And I practice on every instrument. I practice on the guitar. I practice on the piano. And if it's something I can't play, then I can't teach it. So I'll
And then he
break it down,
practices on me.
and then I practice on and I slap him beside the head.
Yes.
Slap him.
So it's important to understand that before you get to rehearsal, you got to practice and know the song, know the songs that are given to you. Our worship team receives the song the Wednesday before every service, every Sunday. So the Wednesday before. By the time they come to the rehearsal, they should have we have rehearsal on Thursday nights. By the time they come to rehearsal, they should have heard it many times and already have a good understanding of what the song is. And if they need help, that's what I'm here for. My job is to help after that. But if they don't come knowing the song, at least hearing it, understanding the basics of the song, then it makes my job more difficult. Then we're wasting time in rehearsal. So it's important.
Rehearsal is not practice.
It's
time.
not practicing.
And we'll find out that next week.
Rehearsal is what we'll talk about next time. But practicing is what you're doing.
I have a question though.
Yes.
Are we talking about?
By saying this, do not blame that game on the defense, okay?
We're not playing. We're not talking about defense.
Who you play. A school team, a junior college team, a college team, much less an NFL team. When you turn the ball over 5 times, 4 interceptions, 1 for a touchdown,
It's 'cause of
3
practice.
others in field position to set up touchdowns, you ain't gonna beat anybody I just talked about. Anybody. All right? And that was a disgraceful performance, in my opinion. We threw that game. We gave it away. By
So is
doing
that about practice?
We gave them the friggin' game.
Yes.
You think you pulled that away?
That
Before
is,
he said freaking, which should not be used, but
well,
He was going to go on to say playoffs.
playoffs.
We'll talk about playoffs.
practice.
practice.
Oh,
So
we're
it's
talking about
important.
practice.
Yeah, so it's important to understand that practice. If you're not practicing on your own, and this is what I've told everyone who has started in this ministry understands how important practice is, and they understand that if I feel they're not practicing, they will be giving another sheet. When we first started, everyone had to turn in a practice log. The practice log that I was talking about, they had to turn one in to me every single week, and if they didn't, then I know something was wrong. After a while, I understood that they understood what practice was, so I didn't require it from them. But the moment they understand that the moment that I see the lack of practice, they will be giving a practice log so that they could document their practices. And if they fail to do that, then they're telling me that they really don't want to be part of this ministry. They don't want to give God their best. And do you really want to do you want a ministry of people who are not giving God their best? You know, I don't, it doesn't matter to me if you're like the most excellent musician. You could be the worst musician, but as long as you're practicing, I know you're giving God your best.
Come on.
And that's what's important to God.
Come on.
And that's what's important to me. As long as you're giving your best, I can work with you.
Come
We
on.
can do things. We can figure this out. But if you're not, don't even show up.
Come on, Carl.
Man, that was a in-depth practice session.
I feel like I should go and practice, even though I don't play an instrument.
Good.
Well, that's funny you say that because the only 12 major notes that I know are the 12 days of Christmas.
Let's do it.
On the 12th day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 12 drummers, drummer 11, pipers piping 10, Lord the leaping 9, ladies dancing 8, maids and milking 7, swans and swimming 6, geese a laying 5 golden rings. 4 calling birds, 3 French hens, 2 turtle doves, and a partridge in a pear tree. Yeah. So there you go. Practice.
We're talking about practice.
Man.
You know, we love sports, and I love how many times a coach. That is what I was trying to do with Jim Mora there, but it was too long of a clip. But he talks about how they lost the game, not in the game, but they lost the game in practice because people weren't willing to practice. And so then they asked him, is the team going to make the playoffs? He said, playoffs? We're talking about playoffs? We can't even practice. practice.
Wow. And that performance will also be a reflection to the people. So people will see that, and then people would not be maybe willing to worship. And that's also an important thing. So that may be another aspect you want to touch on our next segment. Excellent. All right. Well, with that in mind, let's jump into Tech Talk.
That you don't stop.
Tech Talk.
That you don't stop.